I do think he's an intriguing prospect. He has really great size, ball skills, and even shows some good fundamentals in albeit limited route tree. Also, he's shown the ability to be able to improve by improving his hands this past season. So if he can continue on that trajectory, he does have a good chance to be able to really exceed expectations and be a really nice surprise for a team. Hey y'all! For this video, we'll be continuing going through the 2025 wide receiver prospects, going through Jordan Watkins from Ole Miss, Josh Kelly from Texas Tech, Kaden Prather from Maryland, KeAndre Lambert-Smith from Auburn, and Kobe Hudson from UCF. If you're new to these, my wide receiver evals use some different grading methods, which you want more details on these. You can check out part 1 of the series, which should be accessible, link that should be on screen now, as I have more details on how I do my grading in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the receivers from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link that should be in the description. For new viewers, I also have evals and full scouting reports out for players like Emeka Egbuka, Elikayo Manor, Isaiah Bond, Jack Besh, Jalen Royals, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, and a lot more if you want to check them out on my channel as well. I'll be continuing to go through my top 50 wide receivers in the draft, so be sure you don't miss any other parts of wide receiver series or any other positional group series in the future. Be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Watkins. Starting with a look at Watkins' stats, his 68 targets for 49 receptions come off as solid at best. However, then when you see that he got 906 yards or 18.5 yards per reception and 9 touchdowns or a touchdown nearly a fifth of his receptions, it definitely starts to get some more attention. Watkins has had a few drops throughout his career, but finished it off with just 2 drops in 2024 for a drop rate of 3.9%. Also, after primarily playing from the slot the past 2 seasons at Ole Miss, Watkins got more experience playing on the outside, playing slightly over 2/3 of his snaps there in 2024. Looking at some of his highlight games, we can see he had some really great games, including Duke and Arkansas, when he had 7 receptions for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns against Duke, and an incredible 8 receptions for 254 yards and a whopping 5 touchdowns against Arkansas. So those were some great performances, but it does kind of just make me nervous that he had nearly a third of his season receptions, about a half of his receiving yards, and nearly all of his touchdowns in just those 2 games against Duke and Arkansas. So if we remove those games, then he would have finished at 34 receptions, 472 yards, and 2 touchdowns over the course of 10 games, which equals out to about 3.4 receptions and 47.2 yards per game, which is a bit less impressive, especially considering the easy start that Ole Miss had at the beginning of their season. However, his performance in the competitive game against Georgia, making 4 receptions for 68 yards, does give him some more hope they can maybe produce a bit more consistently against tough opponents. So to see how his grades look and to see if they can shed some light on him, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he can finish deep passes thanks to being able to finish catches over his shoulders. Also, he showed good awareness around the sidelines to be able to make some tough, difficult catches as well. He also makes passes easier for himself and the quarterback by working back to the quarterback. When he's doing that, he also does a good job backing out the defender to let him swallow up the ball with his body. It isn't always the prettiest process, but it often led to success in his contested catch situations with a success rate of 55.6% in 2024 and 45.9% for his entire career. Part why I said it isn't the prettiest process though is because his hands scare me. He doesn't look that comfortable making catches away from his frame and can sometimes mistime his hands potentially due to ball tracking issues. That led to him either unnecessarily body catching balls or making awkward approaches to the ball. For the attacks he did try to make with his hands and not his body, he often lacked full arm extension, which could lead to more incompletions in the NFL. So though his catching numbers don't indicate concern, the actual process he caught the ball earned him a C for his hands. However, he was able to get a B+ for his jump ball and contested catch, but earned just a C+ for his body control and ball tracking due to some ball tracking issues. For his route running and release, he shows good strength and balance in his release as he can often power through contact to try to stay on his route path. Despite not being the prettiest route runner, he also has a good eye for spotting openings against zone coverage and can make himself a ready target for the quarterback. But like I said, his route running isn't pretty and it is rough as his routes often have little to no nuance. He also typically round his cuts and has little explosion in his cuts as he tries to make them. Those issues led to infrequent separation. His release was also pretty ineffective and has suboptimal arm use. He doesn't often use his arms enough to clear contact, which causes him issues establishing leverage and affected his separation as well. Unfortunately, his feet also aren't quick enough to be able to slip past defenders, and he has far too limited of a release package to be able to trick defenders as well. So things continue to go in the wrong direction for Watkins, earning a C- for his route running and a D+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, his straight line speed stood out in yards after catch situations. His fluid transition upfield after the catch also stood out and let him quickly get up to full speed very quickly. He also runs with good vision and pad level to help survive arm tackles. However, he is pretty stiff of an athlete with some difficulties changing directions quickly, which can make it hard for him to be able to make defenders miss. Also, he seemed to be uncreative in open space and often just tried to run past defenders. so while he tested well athletically, it doesn't always show on the field. As for how he fits in the NFL, he offers a lot of versatility that can be used anywhere in the formation. He has experience playing out wide, in the slot, being moved in motion, and even in the backfield. That being said, while he might be able to play in different spots, I'm not confident he's going to be able to play well in those spots. He's a raw player with solid testing numbers, but is stiff, which limits how much he can help that carry him while he works on his deficits. And then you add in his iffy hands, and I just have a hard time being too confident in him at the next level. So Watkins got a solid B for his yards after catch potential, but just a C for his future role, but then got a B plus for his athleticism and RAS thanks to his good testing numbers. So like his stats, pretty inconsistent across the board. For a summary of his strengths, while he doesn't have the biggest frame, he does know how to maximize it by using his body to box out defenders and work back to the quarterback to give himself easier opportunities, which helped his drop numbers and success in contested catch situations. Also, he shows some good ability to get yards after the catch thanks to his speed and contact balance. His vision also helped him after the catch and on returns as well. Speaking of helping on returns, he can help in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different spots, which could help make his path to playing time a little bit easier. That being said, he's a pretty raw player in a lot of ways. He doesn't extend his arms out enough and often relies on body catches, which could tank his drop rate and success in contested catch situations in the NFL. Also, he ran a pretty limited route tree and struggled to get separation due to having no nuance and poor cuts in his routes. His underdeveloped release also didn't help him separate, and often let the defenders get in his hip pocket at the start of the play. Finally, while he tested well, he is a pretty stiff athlete, which can limit his big play ability on returns and after the catch. So by taking the average of all his grades, Watkins earned a 2.37 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. I was curious to see if Watkins would impress me on a deeper dive after stepping up after Trey Harris missed time. Unfortunately, I'm just kind of whelmed at best, since I just don't feel like he has the ball skills, technique, or fluidity to be a consistent contributor on an NFL offense. As for a comp, I have Chad Williams as his comp. Both are developmental players, but had their moments of big games. Also, both are tough to bring down after the catch. However, both have serious deficits in their route running and release, which will limit them in the NFL. Also, both are stiff athletes, which limits their playmaking as well. Williams is a pretty unproductive player in the NFL, and I have a bad feeling Watkins could be too. There's just a lot of holes in his games that a good 40 time can't fix. Moving to our next receiver, Josh Kelly from Texas Tech. From a statistical standpoint, Kelly was fantastic, earning 123 targets and converting those into 89 receptions and 1,023 yards. That being said, his touchdown total of just 5 was a bit disappointing. His number of drops also wasn't great with 6 in 2024, but with so many targets that turned into just a drop rate of 6.3%, which is a bit more palatable. Also, despite his 6'1" size and playing the majority of snaps from the outside for the rest of his college career, he moved to the slot when he transferred to Texas Tech for the 2024 season and played slightly over 90% of his snaps from the slot. Looking at some of his highlight games against Colorado, Iowa State, and Baylor, he had good statistical performances in all these games with at least 8 receptions and 76 yards. Now, I do think it's worth pointing out that Texas Tech got blown out by Baylor, so that game may need to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. Also, he might need to do the same thing with his Iowa State game, since his receptions for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns is good, but less exciting when you see that he did this because he got a ridiculous 18 targets that game. That being said, his Colorado game didn't have an absurd number of targets and was competitive for the majority of it. Looking at his whole season, he did a good job racking up receptions with at least 7 receptions in 9 of his 12 games in 2024. His yardage could fluctuate sometimes. Typically, he had more than 70 yards in the majority of his games, but when he didn't hit that mark, he typically finished right around 30 yards. So to see if some of that good production led to good grades, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he has very good hands as he consistently catches the ball with good hand technique and away from his body. He also usually uses late hands and works back to the quarterback to make it more difficult for defenders to make a play on the ball. The adjustments that he can make to throws and the good timing he uses in his ball attacks also make things harder on defenders. He has a great "that ball is mine" mentality when he goes for attacks on the ball. He's also fearless in the middle of the field and will go up for a catch regardless of incoming defenders. Now, while he's fearless, he sometimes can't struggle to finish those catches due to his thin frame with a contested catch rate of just 50%. Also, as I mentioned before, he doesn't have a ton of drops when taking into account his target load, but it is still a fair amount and can be better. So Kelly has a very good start with an A- for his hands, a B for his jump ball contested catch, and then another A- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running release, I was extremely impressed by the polish he brings to his route running. He's a smooth operator and always looks in control in his underneath routes. He has efficient footwork to be able to set up his defender and cross him over with clean cuts. He brings great timing with his cuts and good use of fakes to be able to get his defender to bite. His tempo is also crucial in his ability to win on routes since it helps him mask his lack of great speed. All those great skills help him quickly establish leverage and get consistent separation underneath. On top of that, he has a great eye for openings against zone coverage and is very quick at identifying when to cut off his route to stop himself from running into a defender. That being said, his thin frame does get in the way again as it causes him to have trouble separating downfield. Defenders could usually very easily shut him down by getting their hands on him on his routes past the sticks or in his release. That led to the majority of his targets being behind the sticks, which we can see with his low ADOT of 7.3 in 2024. He also needs to be more proactive with his arm counters to be able to keep himself clean, since it was just too easy for defenders to stop him. In addition to his physicality impacting his route success, his cuts also lacked explosiveness, which reduced his separation at times. Also, he ran somewhat a limited route tree this year, which does make it a little bit hard to trust him running good routes from a fully developed route tree. So while I did want to give him more credit for his route running, the struggles with physicality and down the field issues kept him at just a B. Speaking of struggles with physicality, that was also part of what caused him to have a very poor D+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, he has a good time with his cuts to force more missed tackles than you'd think he'd be able to at his size without great athleticism. He also has a quick transition to turn upfield and be ready for defenders. That ability to be ready for defenders pairs well with his great vision as he's able to accurately read his blocks and take the best course to be able to get the most out of his opportunities. He also showed great effort as a blocker as he consistently was finding ways to be able to hold his block downfield for his teammates. He blocks with active feet, a good base, and well-placed hands to help hold up a fair amount of times. However, he is just so limited athletically, and for any video viewers, his RAS score of a 2.47 out of 10 is not a typo. His frame already knocked him down, but his poor 33-inch vertical and an awful 4.7 40-yard dash time plummeted him to finishing amongst the bottom 1,000 receivers since 1987. That lack of speed especially showed on the field as he was frequently caught from behind. Also, he typically went down to first contact, which also limits how much yards he can get after the catch. Finally, while he was a mostly solid blocker, he does need to work to get better leverage to be able to ensure he can seal a block against a bigger, better defender in the NFL. As for how he fits in the NFL, well, it's hard. There are definitely some traits I like about him, especially with his route running and his hands, but that 40-yard time just doesn't usually lead to a contributor in the NFL unless the players are elite in those other areas. Like I said, I think he's good in a lot of areas with very good ball skills and being a solid route runner, but I think his frame will negatively impact his ball skills, and his limited route tree could reduce his functionality enough in the NFL to reduce his impact that he can have. So despite the poor athleticism, Kelly still shows some good fundamentals when he had the ball in his hands and earned a C+ for his yards after catch potential. While there are traits I do really like, he earned just a C for his future role due to his limited athleticism, which also led to him getting an F due to his horrendous RAS score. For a summary of his strengths, Kelly has great ball skills which can help give him a great catch radius and make him a reliable receiving option in most plays. Also, he is a really impressive route runner with great cuts and nuance to his routes to help get early separation underneath. Though he's limited athletically, he does have some really well-timed cuts which can make defenders miss as well. Finally, he shows tremendous effort as a blocker at times, which could impress a coach enough to be able to get him some early playing time. For as good as his route running is, he does this off of a limited route tree, which is disappointing if a team does need him to help down the field more. Also, while he makes clean cuts, he struggles making explosive cuts, which plays a part in some of his separation issues. What also plays a part in his separation issues is also his struggles against physical coverage, who can push him around and take him down at first contact. Finally, his lack of speed is just really limiting, and it's just hard to trust he'll be able to overcome that in the NFL when it already caused him issues in college. So by taking the average of all his grades, Kelly earned a 2.37 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. If Kelly was just an average athlete, I'd be willing to buy into him being a successful NFL player or at least an underrated prospect. However, that lack of athleticism is just really tough, and the difficulties dealing with physicality make him extremely limited. I think he could be a very good underneath slot player, but those are less useful in the NFL than they are in college. As for a comp, I have KJ Hill as his comp. Both are quality route runners who bring crisp cuts and nuance to their routes. Also, both have great hands and aren't afraid to work in the middle of the field. However, both are lacking athletes, which could bite them more in the NFL. Also, both can struggle with physical coverage, which make things even more dire for them. Hill had a short stint in the NFL, but failed to make much of an impression, leading to him entering the Canadian Football League. But I do think it will be hard for him to stick with an NFL team if he doesn't at the very least improve the way he survives contact on his routes. Moving to our next receiver, Kaden Prather from Maryland. I went into the season with somewhat high expectations for Prather after a good, but maybe demonic 2023 season when he had 666 yards receiving. I was kind of disappointed with him in 2024 though, as his teammate Ty Fellon, who we'll get to later in the series, stole a spotlight from him. Regardless, Prather still had a modest showing, getting 87 targets and converting those into 56 receptions for 624 yards and 4 touchdowns, so at least less demonic this year. While statistical production didn't improve, his hands greatly improved. Prior to the 2024 season, Prather never had a drop rate less than 10%. However, he greatly improved that in 2024, dropping that down to just a single drop for a drop rate of 1.8%. What didn't change this year for Prather was playing the majority of his snaps outside, with slightly over 90% of his snaps coming from there, which shouldn't be surprising given his 6'4 size. Look at his highlight games against Penn State, Oregon, and USC. We start to see the disappointing production, as I mentioned before, as he failed to get more than 2 receptions or more than 25 yards against Penn State or Oregon, even with those games being blowouts and having the chance to get some garbage time catches. Now, his USC performance was actually a competitive game and was great as he was able to get 9 receptions for 111 yards. However, USC's defense isn't close to the level of Penn State and Oregon. Look at the rest of the season. We saw that Prather did better against competition that wasn't quite as strong, getting at least 5 catches in 7 of his 12 games and at least 50 yards in 6 of his 12. So to see if he has enough talent to beat better opponents or just continue to either punch at or below his level, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, as I mentioned, his hands greatly improved with better hand technique and focus, leading to less drops. He'll seem more confident with his ball tracking. Also, he has a big catch radius due to his size, but his ability to be able to make impressive body adjustments makes him nearly unguardable at times. He's capable of going high and low for balls, which gives the quarterback room for error or room to be aggressive. Quarterbacks can even be aggressive around the sideline since he has great sideline awareness. Despite the improvements he made in his hands, it could also be just a small sample size effect. When compared to the other receivers in this class, his sample size is a lot lower, so I'd be curious to see how his hands hold up when he had more opportunities, kind of like in the game against USC, where he was peppered with targets. Also, his consistency finishing catches through contact unfortunately did take a step back, as it was typically around 50% before this year, but dropped to 35.3% this year. So a lot more good than bad thanks to the improvements he made. He earned a B for his hands, as well as a B for his jump ball and contested catch. Also, he earned a B+ for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running release, he showed some use of nuance in his route running with stem and head fakes. The more impressive thing though is that his cuts got a lot cleaner and crisp this year, which is a good development. As much as he has been an interesting player for me to watch though, he isn't quite there in his development, and particularly as a route runner. Like I said, he will try to use nuance, but it has varying degrees of success, and his routes are often still too easy to read at times. His routes can also be too easy to read due to running a limited route tree. While he could make some sharp cuts in his routes he ran, he also could just sometimes throw himself off balance a bit due to trying to find his footwork. He can also get thrown off balance by physical coverage, as he can let himself get pushed off his path route. He also struggled to stack his defender, which impacted his ability to contribute on vertical plays. He also lacks enough wiggle and foot speed to be able to consistently win against press with just his feet. Normally that wouldn't be a major issue thanks to his long arms, but he unfortunately just doesn't effectively use arm counters enough right now. That issue consistently winning against press led to struggles in establishing leverage against press coverage, and if he wants to beat press coverage more frequently, he will definitely need to also expand his arsenal and work on more moves rather than just trying to run around the defender. So Prather did start to take a step back, which is a C for his route running and a D+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role and athleticism or RAS, he has good vision after the catch to follow his blocks. Finally, he's a good blocker who understands the need to be able to still get leverage at his size. He does a good job bending his knees to get leverage, but also does a good job getting square and setting a good base to give himself some quality blocks. However, he is less of an explosive athlete than I believed he was based on his combine testing. That along with his stiffness contributed to him being a bit disappointing after the catch. He also unfortunately has little wiggle and not much power to be able to pick up yards after the catch. As for how he fits in the NFL, I do think he's an intriguing prospect. He has really great size, ball skills, and even shows some good fundamentals in albeit limited route tree. Also, he's shown the ability to be able to improve by improving his hands this past season. So if he can continue on that trajectory, he does have a good chance to be able to really exceed expectations and be a really nice surprise for a team. If he isn't able to make those adjustments though, it might be tough for him to be able to get playing time and potentially even make a roster. So there's a wide range of outcomes that could happen for Prather, which is why I'm not really sure why he even bothered to declare this year and didn't just wait for another year. So with average results across the board, he earned a C for his yards at the catch potential, and a C+ for his future role and athleticism or RAS. As summary of his strengths, his improved hands are the number one thing that really made me happy when I saw Prather this year. That let him play to his best with great body adjustments and a big catch radius and not lead to missed opportunities due to lapses in his hands. Also, while he isn't the most elusive in space, he does show great vision in space to be able to use his blockers and make the most of his opportunities. Also, he showed he wasn't selfish and returned the favor with great effort and technique in his blocks for his teammates. Despite some really interesting skills as a route runner, he did run a pretty limited route tree, which does make it a little bit harder for him to translate any route running traits to the NFL. Also, he can sometimes have his routes spoiled due to losing his balance in his cuts or getting pushed off balance by defenders. His disappointing athleticism also decreases his ability to make defenders miss and reduces vertical ability. So by taking the average of all his grades, Prather earned a 2.42 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. As I mentioned before, I don't really know why Prather decided to declare for the draft. From what I saw, he should have one more year of eligibility left, and he just isn't there with his development just yet to be ready for the NFL. I think he really could have benefited from just returning to school and potentially transferring to a bigger program. However, now we just have to try to hope that Prather does somehow make those necessary progressions as he takes the next step up in the level of competition into the NFL. As for a comp, I have Racey McMath as his comp. Both have big frames that let him have a big catch radius, and both also show some upside as route runners when they clean up their inconsistencies and add some nuance. However, both are still very raw players who will have to be more dart throws, hoping that they can match their potential. Also, both can be a bit stiff, which may limit their upside after the catch. McMath has a fun name, but failed to do much in the NFL and moved to the UFL to try to revive the hopes of an NFL career. I'm not positive Prather will burn out as quickly as McMath did, but I'm also not confident he's going to be able to make the adjustments he needs in the NFL. Again, I just really wish he would have just returned to school for another year, but this is kind of where we're at now. Moving to our next receiver, KeAndre Lambert-Smith from Auburn. After spending his first 4 seasons at Penn State, Lambert-Smith transferred to Auburn and got 79 targets for 50 receptions and set a career high in receiving yards and touchdowns with 981 yards and 8 touchdowns. With that many receiving yards, he had a very impressive yards per catch of 19.6. He also had a career low in drop rate with just 3 drops for a drop rate of 5.7. Also, he played the majority of snaps from the outside this year again. Looking at his highlight games against Alabama, Texas A&M, and Georgia, while his production was hit or miss due to being a deeper target, he was very good in most of these games, especially his Alabama and Georgia games, when he had 8 receptions for 116 yards against Alabama and 7 receptions for 95 yards against Georgia. He had less targets and receptions in the Texas A&M game, but was able to connect on a 60 and 44-yard pass to be able to push his receiving totals past 100 yards that game. For the rest of his games, as I mentioned, with him being more of a deep threat, we saw some inconsistencies in weekly reception totals with just 3 games out of his 12 in 2024 where he had at least more than 5 receptions. However, he impressively was pretty reliable from a receiving yard total with 9 games out of his 12 when he had over 70 yards. The thing that was even more impressive with that is that Auburn's passing offense was pretty inconsistent a lot of the times for the season, so to be able to be a focal point of it was great to see. Now the trade-off of that was Auburn was also trailing for a lot of their games throughout the season, so there's plenty of chances for Lambert-Smith to get targeted. So to see if he was truly producing or was just taking advantage of being on a bad team, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he's very comfortable making catches over his shoulders. He even showed good awareness around the sidelines to be able to add more upside. His huge catch radius also adds a lot of upside as well. He has a very long frame and is capable of making some really nice body adjustments to get his hands on the ball. He does a great job extending his long arms to go high and low for balls to make it very easy for a quarterback to get a ball in a striking distance. Now while he can make some impressive catches and make some plays down the field, everything in between those highlight plays can be a bit rough. His hands can often be delayed on shorter patterns and sometimes lets defenders beat him to the ball due to not using his frame to box them out. Also, though he had a good rate of converting contested catch situations with 50% in 2024, that was just based off 14 opportunities, which is a pretty low amount to be able to trust that he's truly at that point now. With his career contested catch rate being 36.6% even when factoring in the good 2024 year, that does make me nervous if we're truly able to trust that 2024 rate. Also, though his drop rate did improve, he still has enough drops where it can lead to some frustrating missed opportunities as well. So though there were improvements, with him still showing lingering inconsistencies, he earned a C+ for his hands and jump ball and contested catch, but a great A- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he has great vertical speed and acceleration to quickly eat up a cushion and beat defenders downfield. When he isn't doing that though, it can be rough. He has a very limited route tree as it's primarily made up of vertical and hitch routes, which leads to him just running cardio sometimes. His hitch routes also aren't as successful as they should be due to him not selling his vertical enough and telegraphing when he's going to go into his cut. When he's making his cut, he also takes rounded cuts and will need a few extra steps to be able to make it if he tries to make them more concise. He also doesn't run with much nuance in his routes and struggles to find openings against zone coverage. He also going to get pushed around in coverage and struggle to navigate the middle of the field on his shorter patterns. He also just doesn't look comfortable running the routes in the middle of the field as he sometimes seems like he's thinking too much and counting his steps, which slows his process. His feet also just aren't shifty enough to be able to help him keep clean against press. So things unfortunately went back to being bad for Lambert-Smith very quickly with just a D for his route running and a C- for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, he's a solid blocker who knows how to use arm extensions to hold his blocks. Also, as I mentioned, he has great speed as well as acceleration that lets him pick up yards very quickly when there is an opening. With him being a vertical player, he didn't have a lot of opportunities after the catch, but still finished with a good amount relative to a season-long receiving total. That being said, when we look at his numbers from an individual game perspective, he got nearly 50% of his yards after the catch against just Arkansas and Alabama, which does poke holes into how much he is able to produce in that area on a weekly basis. At his size, he just doesn't have great twitch or contact balance, as defenders are often able to get mostly square with him and take him down in space. As for his fit in the NFL, he feels like he has a very clean fit to be a vertical player for a team, similar as Dante Thornton Jr. from Tennessee. What he can do outside of that, though, is a big question. He's a very raw route runner and can have iffy catch attempts, which does make him a little bit harder to trust underneath. Also, though he can use his speed to get downfield, his lack of success killing the escaping press could make him less reliable in this area in the NFL. Regardless, if an NFL defense knows that you're only going to mostly do just one thing, you better be darn good at it or just be an absolute athletic freak to be able to make it hard for them to be able to stop you. Unfortunately, I'm just not confident in Lambert-Smith being that good or being that athletic enough to be able to overcome those defenses being ready for him. So Lambert-Smith ended up earning a C+ for his yards after catch potential and future role, and earned a solid B for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, Lambert-Smith is a vertical specialist with great vertical ability and good straight line speed to beat defenders downfield. Also, he does add a little bit of versatility with his huge catch radius, thanks to his size, as well as being able to make some good body adjustments to throws that other vertical options usually aren't able to pull off. Also, him likely going to be an X receiver in the NFL, it is good to see him have good blocking ability to help secure snaps from the outside if he is able to earn them. That being said, earning those snaps could be difficult for him, since outside of running vertical patterns, he's just often ineffective due to an underdeveloped route tree that lacks nuance in his routes that he does run. Also, his release in hands could create more issues in the NFL and lead to him being less effective as a vertical threat. Finally, while he has some nice yak totals, he has little wiggle to make defenders miss and mostly just relies on outrunning defenders, which will be less successful in the NFL. So by taking the average of all its grades, Lambert-Smith earned a 2.33 out of 4, which continues the streak and also puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. Lambert-Smith could probably be one of the quickest evaluation people since he operates as such a limited player. He's primarily a vertical player who has moments of great ball skills downfield to be able to give some hope for more potential. However, he just really struggles with a lot of tasks when asked to branch out of that. Maybe a team would be open to trying to develop him, but he just kind of feels like a player who could lose his roster spot if he doesn't become a great gunner or quickly develop in his route running. As for a comp, I have Taekwon Thornton as his comp. Both have tall, thin builds that have great speed to be able to get downfield in an instant. Also, both are very capable blockers and have flashes of great ball skills. However, both are very behind as route runners and limited in their use. Both also lack wiggle, which can reduce to them being more sprinters than playmakers on the field. Thornton has looked like a bust due to the Patriots reaching for him in the second round and having way too high of expectations for him. Maybe Lambert-Smith is given more patience and has a chance to work out, but I just have a hard time trusting him developing with how far behind he is. Going to our final player of the group, Kobe Hudson from UCF. After a few solid years, including finishing at 44 receptions for 900 yards and 8 touchdowns in 2023, Hudson was a popular sleeper pick for the 2025 NFL Draft. At the start of the year, it seemed like he was likely going to be a big riser as he had 13 receptions for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, 2 of those 3 games came against Sam Houston and New Hampshire, so it was against lower level opponents. However, he did have a very good game against TCU, which did give people hope as he had 6 receptions for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he quickly faded after that, finishing with just 88 targets, 47 receptions, 770 yards, and 4 touchdowns throughout the whole season. So that season total is pretty rough as it is, and then when you remove those 3 early games, that left him with 34 receptions for 460 yards and 2 touchdowns over the course of 9 games, which is even less impressive, especially considering that he's the top receiver of his team. To make things worse, he also continued to struggle with drops, with 6 drops for a drop rate of 11.3%. The bad thing too is that technically his 2024 drop rate was actually a career low for him, since he's always flirted around the drop rate with 11%, with a career drop rate of 12.1%. Also, he continued to play the majority of snaps from the outside, with about 80% of his snaps coming from there in 2024. Looking at his highlight games, I didn't include his first 3 games and instead included Utah, Iowa State, and Colorado. He did thankfully have a decent amount of receptions against Utah, with 7 receptions for 79 yards, but he did need 16 targets to get there. Also, he had a whopping 3 drops in that game, which takes away from any remaining shine from that game. He did have no drops in his Iowa State and Colorado games, but also had a lot less production, getting no more than 3 receptions and 39 yards in either game. Looking at the rest of his games, his production was all over the place, with only 4 games out of his 11 full games with at least 5 receptions. His receiving yards totals were better, with 8 games out of his 11 with at least 50 yards, but UCF also had a bit of a similar story as Auburn, as they're often trailing, which boosted Hudson's opportunities. Regardless, with his stats all over the place, it's probably best to just start to look at his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he has a very wide catch radius. He's able to rise and snatch balls. He also makes some really impressive last-second adjustments to balls. He also has tough hands and was more successful in contested catch situations in 2024 with a success rate of 48.1%. He's also able to finish catches in these situations thanks to boxing out his defender and consistently catching the ball away from his frame. Though he can make some really impressive highlight-level catches, his hand technique and focus can fluctuate, leading to some really disappointing missed opportunities and his high number of drops. His high number of drops is really concerning, and it's even more concerning when we circle back to that Utah game when he had 3 drops on 16 targets. I think that kind of exposes his lack of focus and tendencies to have lapses, which will likely limit him from having a high usage in the NFL. Also, though he did have a better rate in contested catch situations, he still typically has been a sub 50% player, which is disappointing since he has the hand strength and frame to be better at this. So due to his lapses, Hudson earned just a C for his hands, but did earn B pluses for his jump ball and contested catch and body control and ball tracking. For his route running release, he showed some impressive release skills with a variety of moves in his arsenal. He has quick feet and good timing to be able to establish leverage very quickly, and has good use of hand counters to maintain his control in his route. Unfortunately, his release often can't make up for his route running. He ran a limited route tree and had fluctuating route intensity throughout his routes. He has a tendency to round his cuts, which is especially noticeable on his in-breaking routes. When he did try to make sharper cuts, he often needed a few extra steps to be able to finish the cut. That greatly impacted his ability to get consistent separation and was a part of what led him to have consistent production. What also impacted his ability to separate was his lack of explosiveness in his cuts. All those issues led to a fair amount of trouble beating man coverage and him needing to resort to winning jump ball situations. Also, he unfortunately also struggles against zone coverage and will miss openings in the defense. Finally, he can also do a better job adjusting the path of his routes to not lead himself into coverage. So we got a mixed bag with Hudson, earning a C for his route running, but a B plus for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future realm athleticism or RAS, he looked good as a blocker as he does a good job setting his base as a blocker and uses good arm extension with good hand placement. Unfortunately, we do see some of his effort issues again, as he doesn't always bring a lot of intensity as a blocker and sometimes just looks to hold his block instead of mauling his man. Also, he just doesn't offer much after the catch since his straight line speed is pedestrian and he lacks wiggle to make defenders miss in space. Speaking of that speed, we did see that through his athletic testing, as he had pretty poor testing at his size with a high 4.5 40 and pedestrian jumping numbers, which makes him just seem like a more limited athlete than most would hope. As for how he fits in the NFL, he definitely has some fun traits like his ball skills and release skills, however he just seems to have way too much fluctuation in his focus, which leads to drops, and also fluctuation in his effort, which leads to poor separation to be able to trust him consistently at the next level. So things got real bad for Hudson here, earning just C minuses for his yards after catch potential and future role. However, his athleticism RAS was even worse at a D minus. For a summary of his strengths, when he's at his best, or if you watch his highlights, he can be really exciting with the catches he can make with his body adjustments and tough hands. Also, he does have really good release fundamentals that let him overcome his athletic limitations and establish early leverage. Finally, he did show good blocking ability, which could also help him stay on the outside in the NFL. Now, despite how good he looked in his best moments, his fluctuating focus and effort does scare me and is often a recipe for disaster in the NFL. Those issues also led to a high number of drops and poor ability to separate. Also, his lack of explosiveness further limited his ability to separate even on routes when he was dialed in. His limited route tree will also present a problem for NFL teams, and he will need to be locked in when working on broadening his route tree to be able to hopefully get some playing time down the road. When he does get open and makes the catch, he'll likely also continue to struggle getting much after the catch due to his limited athleticism and ability to make defenders miss. So by taking the average of all his grades, Hudson earned a 2.25 out of 4, which caps off the group as a perfect 5 for 5 in placing the needs improvement to contribute tier. Hudson seemed like a player who was potentially going to be a big riser early in the season, but saw a big dip in production and efficiency when teams made adjustments. His lack of athleticism, poor route running, and inconsistent hands often doesn't lead to success in the NFL, as we saw with his former teammate Javon Baker. Maybe Hudson finds that consistency in the NFL, however, if he doesn't, I just think it'll be tough sledding for him to be able to even make a roster. As for a comp, I have Dante Pettis as his comp. Both can make some really impressive acrobatic catches and have a big catch radius, however both struggle with consistency. They can have bad drops as well as poor routes that lead to separation issues as well. Those inconsistencies caught up to Pettis in the NFL, leading to him having a very unproductive career so far. I think Hudson will likely run into similar issues, but won't have the draft capital to justify keeping him on the field like Pettis did. And that's all for part 6. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the receivers in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. This is just part 6 of 10, so I'm just a little over halfway through, but still have a lot more evals to get through over the next few weeks. I know the group for this part was a bit underwhelming, but we have more excited players coming up, including Luther Burden III and Matthew Golden in the next part. So to be sure you don't miss that part when it comes out, or miss any of the other future parts of the series or any other positional groups, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the videos, it would help the channel, the series grow thanks to you. If you want just a run for in the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack as I'll have the full ran eval out for each player at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.